Welcome to Move the Chains with Jonathan Rivers. Here's your host, Jonathan Rivers.
Let there be football. Welcome to Move the Chains. I'm your host and your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. Hey, on the MTC call sheet today, full reaction to the first round of the NFL draft. I understand that rounds 2 and 3 have already happened. I understand what's going to happen in the remaining part of the draft today, but listen, full reaction to the first round first, and then next week I'll give you my full draft in its completion and in its entirety. All right, so first and second down is nothing but draft reaction to the first round. Nonsense narrative, you can't win or lose the draft, ladies and gentlemen, especially not after the first round. So I'm going to hit that nonsense narrative hard because I get tired of people doing segments on it and I get tired of people talking about it. And last but not least, in the NFL, you have to have an identity. And a lot of times your identity is built through the draft, which is why a lot of the teams that you always see drafting at the end of rounds, because they're that good, understand that identities are built and cultures are created in the selections that you make. All that and more right here on Move the Chains. But you know how we do it. Let's kick it off with first down. All right, so let's go ahead and get the elephant out of the room, out of the way right here. Shedeur Sanders was not drafted in the first round. And a lot of people were up in arms that he didn't go in the first round. A lot of people thought in terms of teams, they saw him with a second round grade. Now, if you would ask me why Shedeur didn't go in the first round and why he went later, I would say I don't think it has a lot to do with his play. I think it has a lot to do with his aura. That a lot of people think he sucks the air out of the room. But you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Bill Belichick effect. Remember when Bill Belichick was no longer the head coach of the New England Patriots and it seemed like nobody wanted him to be their head coach? And you ask yourself, hey, how would somebody who won 6 Super Bowls as a head coach, a couple as a defensive coordinator, not have the opportunity to coach in the NFL? Well, a lot of people don't like change sometimes. A lot of people are intimidated by individuals who have big personalities, who are truth speakers, and who get the job done. Now, I don't know this to be true for these NFL organizations that didn't take Shedeur in the first round. All I'm saying is I think it can be the best situation for him because there are currently 8 quarterbacks that are starting quarterbacks that didn't get drafted in the first round, and there are 8 or 9 quarterbacks that are backups that were drafted in the first round, including guys like Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, Mitch Trubisky, Daniel Jones, right? So all I'm saying is you don't have to be a first-round quarterback to be a successful quarterback. See Jalen Hurts, second-round pick, who just won the Super Bowl and has been to 2. So Shedeur Sanders will be fine. I think he's a very good quarterback, will have a very good career. And because he is the quarterback I think he is in terms of being mentally tough, he is somebody who has been able to maybe, be unbothered by the situation. This isn't what he expected. He said that after round 1 completed, but I don't think this is something that's going to bother Shedeur Sanders. He's going to go on and ball out because that's who he is. All right, but I want to show you guys the first 10 picks of the NFL draft. So let's get into the first round a little bit more in depth about those who were taken. Cam Ward was undisputed as the number 1 overall pick, and I told you this before. I have no worries about Cam Ward at the quarterback position. I have all the worries about the Tennessee Titans when it comes to developing Cam Ward. He may play early. This is a team that has now acquired Tyler Lockett. They have Calvin Ridley, so they've got veteran presence for him when it comes to the wide receiver position. But Travis Hunter, generational talent. I firmly believe that. So you want to ask yourself, though, if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars with a brand new GM, who's I think one of the youngest GMs in the NFL, and this is the splash thing that a lot of people talk about. He went up and got Travis Hunter, not only went up and got him at 2, but gave up a first-round pick, gave up a second-round pick, and gave up a first-round pick next year to the Cleveland Browns. So if you're Cleveland, now you're in a situation to where people are trying to give you opportunities to get out of this Deshaun Watson mess because of these picks. But let's see what Cleveland does long term. But if you're Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence has been paid a huge amount of money to be your franchise quarterback. You've extended him now because you think he's the guy. He hasn't necessarily played like the guy. Maybe for 1 season he gave you flashes of what he could be, but he's been very inconsistent and he's been injured. But I think this is an opportunity for him to do big things because he has big-time playmakers, a la Brian Thomas and now Travis Hunter, who they're going to have at wide receiver first. In terms of Jacksonville, this is what they've said coming out of the Jacksonville offices and their personnel, but he definitely will be, I think, a person on the defensive side of the football that makes plays for years to come. I want to talk about Abdul Carter with the Giants. And I think the Giants, who have been terrible the past few years, they made the playoffs like 3 years ago, but I'm going to tell you what they've done well. They've drafted well and built their defensive line. Now that they have Abdul Carter, you add him to guys like Brian Burns, who they signed in free agency, right? You also have Dexter Lawrence, and then you also have Kayvon Thibodeau, who they're going to exercise the 5th option on. The New York Giants have a formidable defensive line. That's all I'm saying. So if they can't do anything else, they're going to be able to get after the passer. So I do appreciate Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and the brain trust of the New York Giants for having that. And I'm somebody who I love what they did with their quarterback room and bringing in Russell Wilson, bringing in Jameis Winston, and then, of course, they traded back into the first round to get Jackson Dart at number 25. So I think the Giants are good there. I also want to talk a little bit about Tyler Warren for the Indianapolis Colts because I think, one, I know Colston Loveland from Michigan went number 10 to the Bears, and they think he's going to be the best fit for them. Tyler Warren is going to be a monster in Indianapolis. Very, very quietly, the Indianapolis Colts have Tyler Warren, they have Josh Downs, they have Michael Pittman Jr., and they have Jonathan Taylor. If you're Anthony Richardson in the Indianapolis Colts, you have to be productive. This is a team that nobody's talking about because they haven't been winning, their quarterback hasn't been playing well, and they haven't necessarily been great on defense. They have pieces on the offensive side of the football more than a lot of other teams that are better than they are. So that speaks to Shane Steichen as a head coach coming into his, second year or so. He's going to have to make sure he can get his quarterback to the level of being able to use those requisite weapons. All right, guys, hey, listen, that's just a piece of the pie. When we come back from second down, it'll be still full first-round reaction right here in the draft. I'm going to tell you why the Baltimore Ravens are reminding me of a division rival that had two defensive players that carried them for almost a decade. We'll be back with more first-round reaction on Move the Chains right after this. And welcome back to Move the Chains. And before I continue with my first-round draft reaction regarding the NFL, I always want to take this opportunity to thank my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ for being in this position to host Move the Chains. Very blessed by it. I also want to thank you, the fans, for always just giving me encouragement and giving me a shout-out and telling me what you think about the show and how you love the show. And thank you for just yelling Move the Chains when you see me out and about. That means a lot. So appreciate the fans that watch, whether it's YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, whether they watch on WXTX Fox 54. It's all appreciated. And last but not least, I want to give a shout out to the best production crew in the business. Big things are coming because I have a production crew with vision. They understand my vision and they help execute it. So I want you to be ready for the changes that are coming on Move the Chains, not just for the better, but for the greater. So shout out to everybody that has anything to do with this show because they are the best production crew in the business. Hey, but having said all that, you know what time it is. It's time for second down. All right, so continuing here with the first round of the 2025 NFL Draft, there's a team that really did something for me. We're going to finish off when we get through picks like 11 through 20, and then, of course, 21 through 32 I'll be talking about at the end of this segment. But the Baltimore Ravens took Malachi Starks with the 27th overall pick out of Georgia. So this just kind of reaffirms, you look at Jahad Campbell, who went to the Philadelphia Eagles from Alabama. You look at all the SEC, Jackson Dart I already talked about from Ole Miss. I want to tell you guys, again, I want to reiterate how I say the SEC and the Big Ten, but especially the SEC are the new farm system for the NFL. That's just what it is. And good teams know where to get good players who were coached very well. But I want to talk about Malachi Starks because the Ravens now have Malachi Starks along with Kyle Hamilton. So I just want to ask, though, do you remember the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 2000s when they had Troy Polamalu and Ryan Clark? I think the best tandem of safeties in the NFL for that 10 to 12-year stretch that they played together, and maybe one of the best tandems in history. I mean, I'm being serious here because Troy Polamalu would play strong safety, would play linebacker, and would be up at the line of scrimmage and wreak havoc. Don't you know that Kyle Hamilton does the exact same thing? And don't you know that Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator for the Ravens, has even more flexibility because they've drafted Malachi Starks? So you can put Malachi back at free safety if you wanted to, or you could switch them and move one up. I just think the versatility of their secondary to go along with guys like Marlon Humphrey, who's been a top-tier corner since he's been in the league. He's just dealt with health issues. They drafted Nate Wiggins out of Clemson last year in the first round. The Ravens are serious, man, and they have not been drafting in the top 25 forever, but yet they always get a guy who helps them early and builds that roster. That's how great teams do it. But I also want to talk about two coaches and two teams. I want to talk about the Denver Broncos first and how they drafted Jahdae Barron, the safety out of Texas. Ladies and gentlemen, this was a Patrick Mahomes draft pick. But what do you mean it was a Patrick Mahomes draft pick? It has nothing to do with the Chiefs. It has everything to do with the Chiefs. Jahdae Barron was one of the best people in secondary in college football coming out of Texas. Can cover, can play in the run, can cover in the slot. But do you remember Justin Simmons, who's now with the Atlanta Falcons? But when he was with the Denver Broncos, he intercepted Patrick Mahomes the most of anybody in the NFL. That's what Sean Payton and that brain trust of the Denver Broncos are thinking. We've got to get guys in the secondary that can handle this business. So let me go ahead and get my draft picks up right here for my graphics so you guys can see the rest of the draft picks from 11 through 20. Okay? So what I'm telling you about that is Jahdae Barrett is going to be a beast. I also look at Mikael Williams. Let's go back to 11 here. Mikael Williams was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers. I put him in the same category as Shamar Stewart, right, out of A&M. Shamar Stewart wasn't great in terms of production, but they're looking at his upside. Mikael Williams has helped Georgia win a national championship as a freshman, and he dealt with some injuries, but they're looking at his upside. And the fact that Robert Saleh is back in his second stint as defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers means everything in my estimation for the development and the growth of Mikael Williams. San Francisco had to let go of a lot of very good players because they were strapped when it came to the salary cap. This is how you rebuild and retool when it comes to San Francisco. Now, Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh, all right? So Pete Carroll, the new head coach of the Vegas Raiders, and I'm going to go back a little bit because I wanted to make sure I talked about this. Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh, have there been any other coaches that have been as successful in college and the NFL as those two guys? I would argue no. And what does everybody always say? You never take a running back in the first round. I already told you I'm against that type of wisdom and thinking. But didn't Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers take a running back in the first round? That's right, they took a Marion Hampton out of North Carolina. Didn't Ashton Genty from Boise State go to the Vegas Raiders at 6? That's right, because Pete Carroll understands that he's got his new beast mode. So when I look at these two teams, these coaches have had the same formula no matter where they've been, whether it's been the San Francisco 49ers for Harbaugh, whether it's been Stanford, or whether it's been Michigan for Harbaugh, whether it's been USC for Pete Carroll, or whether it's been the Seattle Seahawks. They've both won championships. They both know exactly what it is that they're doing. I think understanding who you are is the first step in being successful in the draft. And I think Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh have already added to this division. Remember I told you this division with those two and Sean Payton and Andy Reid, what division has a collection of coaches better than the AFC West? Which is why I think that division will be one of the best in football. And that gentleman right there, Ted McMillan, guys who went to Carolina, let's talk about the Panthers because everybody thought Bryce Young was a bust, right? But when they went out and got 3 offensive linemen, including Robert Hunt, through free agency last year and trade, Bryce Young started to play better in the second half of the season because he was protected. And he started to find his weapons like Adam Thielen, who is a senior receiver and also a veteran receiver, plus Xavier Leggett. Well, now you just add more size, speed, and athleticism with Ted McMillan, who could play in the slot or out wide. So now the Carolina Panthers are becoming a better version of themselves, and their first-round draft pick is showing himself to be the Heisman Trophy winner that he was because he is now surrounded with the weapons that he has. All right, when we come back from the break, why do so many people talk about winning and losing the NFL draft? It's not a thing. I'm going to tell you why after the break. Back when we move the chains, right after this. Welcome back into the show. And listen, we've been talking about the first round of the NFL draft nonstop because you know your boy loves the NFL draft. I played ball, but I'm also a nerd when it comes to this stuff. I'm just transparent, full transparency. And you know that, and I love it, and I think you love it as well. But there's always reaction that just kind of grinds my gears, right? And you know this is what the segment is predicated on. People always like to say things, especially when it comes to the NFL draft, and I just don't believe it. So it's time for my favorite segment of the show so I can get this off my chest. It's time for my nonsense narrative. All right, y'all stay with me here, man. You see the lower third there. You can win the NFL draft. How? Tell me how. Tell me how you can win the draft. And I'm not even talking about just after the first round or the first 2 or 3 rounds. I'm talking about the entirety of the draft. How can you sit here and tell me that after you've looked at these teams, draft 1 through 7, of course we know that every team doesn't get a draft pick in each round, right? And we know that some teams get multiple draft picks in multiple rounds. That's all well and good. But how can you sit here and honestly tell me who won the draft? Now, you can tell me whom you feel like filled the need. Like I told you earlier, I think when the Falcons traded up to get James Pierce in the first round, even though they gave a first-round pick next year in 2026, they filled the need. They also filled the need with Jalen Walker, like they filled needs on the defensive side of the football because their defense has been porous. right? I think that the Kansas City Chiefs, with Josh Simmons at the end of the first round, with pick number 32 after trading with Philly, which, by the way, I love the fact that those two traded with one another. Just the two best franchises in the NFL. They just traded with one another. But Josh Simmons went there, and even if he doesn't play early on, you just signed Jalen Moore from San Francisco. Now you've got time for him to grow in terms of Josh Simmons and be the top 10 value pick that he probably was before he got hurt. But don't tell me somebody won or lost the draft, because you don't know. You know when you know that 4, 5, 6 years down the road, when you look at how these players have come to fruition. Do you remember earlier on in the season when I put up how the Kansas City Chiefs have rebuilt their defense with guys like Trent McDuffie and Nick Bolton? I'll tell you they won the draft in those years today because they were 3 or 4 years prior in the past. Stop giving me these lists of winning and losing the draft the day after the draft is completed when these guys haven't even played a snap in the NFL. I understand it's for content for a lot of people. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't roll that way with content, and I won't do it. Now, they have their opinions, and they can have that. So all I'm saying is you can dominate in free agency, then you can see what happens, right? You can go into the draft, have a plan, execute that plan to a T in terms of whom you wanted and where you wanted to get them for the value in which you wanted and filling a need or getting the best player available. All of those things can be true. But until you've seen what has come and what has not come to fruition, you cannot say you won or lost the NFL draft. All right, when we come back from the break, it'll be time for the final segment of the show, which means it'll be the final drive. Back when we'll move the chains right after this. Hey, welcome back to Move the Chains. And it's time for the final segment of the show, which means it's time for the final drive. This is going to be something I reiterate from earlier on in the show, and really every week you listen to me when I'm talking about NFL or college football. Identities are built through the draft. Now, college football is built through recruiting, but your identity is built through the draft. You have to understand who you are and then make sure that you find players that are accommodating and that fit who you are as an identity. I'm not talking about scheme. You can switch up a scheme, ladies and gentlemen, but your identity is the genesis and the foundation of who you are. And when you have that as an NFL franchise, you've got a leg up on everybody else. Add that with talent, you're Super Bowl contenders. All right, don't forget, you can not only catch Move the Change right here on the Sports Leader WXTX Fox 54, but you can also catch us on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. The link is on the screen. If you go to @move_the_chains, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like, leave a comment, because we're all here for it. Hey, another banger. Round 1 of the NFL draft, full reaction. And next week, I'm going to give you my reaction to the entire draft, right? But for the best production crew in the business, I'm your boy, Jonathan Bam Rivers. And always remember, build every single day of your life brick by brick. And until next time, right here on Move the Chains, God bless.